Infrastructure Services, and apologies for anyone confused. This is the first meeting today as I've got to leave after it for another matter. No public forum. Apologies. I've got apologies from Councillor Stain. I'm just waiting for the rest of the debate to finish. I'll move the apology from Councillor Staines. Seconded. Councillor Lord. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Confirmation of the agenda, which we've got 2 reports. I'll move. Seconded. Councillor Lord. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Declaration of interest. I just note that for record. Now, we have a slight problem in that staff weren't actually aware that the meeting was starting at 1. They thought it was the 1:30. But we've got, I think this has been well publicised, the matters before us on both these issues, so we can start with Sandy covering off. Road names to add to the road name register report. Item 5. Any questions or about perhaps omissions? No, Sandy can answer these questions. She's already offered.
And my question is, if we were adding them to the register, would we not add them the way they would probably turn up on a road name? Would we really call a road Anscombe Edmund?
Good afternoon.
We might put place after it.
The names are placed there so that people can reference them and the research around the person's name, so it's in full, and then the committee could decide which name they might go with.
And also, you're right, so it might be the first one, for example, William Armson. Armson is the obvious name that you would add to the register. Edmund Anscombe, either of those you might want to add, and so the developer might take the name Edmund Anscombe and decide he wanted Edmund Place or Anscombe Way, but that would be the view that they would have that degree of flexibility potentially.
Yeah, so there'd be any of these bits of names potentially would then be on the register. So Macindoe would be on the register, or just if it went with Archibald, or?
The names are presented there, and then the applicant could decide on which it was that they were and bring it to the report to the committee as to this is the decision that we'd like you to make around the road name.
So, for example, we do have the odd example of names that use both. Ethel Benjamin Place, for example. So it might be that someone, to differentiate Archibald Macindoe from another Macindoe, wanted to use both parts of the name. So it just gives the historical context for it, but it just provides a list that they then bring for that next stage.
Presumably it doesn't allow us to...
Sorry, we're not debating, yeah.
Well, I'm just wanting to know, does this list, for example, would somebody just be able to say William Place or something when...
We've already got a William Street, so it's unlikely to pass that list.
Yep. So that one would be Taverner, but it gives the context of why they might want to then go and look at...
No, it might not. It might be Dawson, or it might be Empson, or... I'm just saying, is there any stuff about how we use those?
That's in the policy, I think you'll find. Sorry, I had indicated right at the start, Councillor McTavish, and then I forgot. Apologies.
Well, I guess I'll raise it in debate, but I think Hilary is right in the sense that we do have rules around things like they can't be more than 15 characters long, including a space, and some of these, if you put them together, would be more than 15 characters long, including a space, so possibly we should consider that.
I think part of it is that we're trying to come up with an easier way for applicants to come up with a road name rather than coming up with one from their own minds, and it does mean that they can make a choice between the first name or the last name. The road would still need to come back to the committee for final approval in any case.
So my question, I understand that there has been some work underway around ensuring that there is a greater diversity of people on the list, and wonder whether staff have any comment that they would like to make around that this time.
Tracy will provide some first comment on that.
Yes, so this is the first part of an iterative process. So what we're looking to do is to come up with a more fulsome list of pre-approved road names that the applicants could use. So this first list came about because the research people and the archives people had already come up with a list of specifically Dunedin City officials. So we acknowledge that there's been some media attention around the lack of females on that list. But the second part of this process is that we're going to bring back further reports. The next one is actually of notable Dunedin people, which includes males and females and different ethnicities as well. But we'd also like to invite the committee and the community to come back with suggested names that we could include onto this list. It's an iterative process.
So, follow-up question to that, when might we expect the next tranche of names to be put in front of the committee?
So the 150 notable Dunedin identities has been researched. It's nearly complete. But then the names have been completed by the historians who are looking at that. But then we have to go through and deduplicate that list because a good number of those names have already been used. And so we're in the process of doing that at the moment. And so hopefully that work should be done.
We commit to bring another list back to the next committee.
So in time for the next committee. But it has been challenging when you see the names that are left over of that 150 compared to the streets that we've already named or the names that wouldn't meet the policy. But we're doing that work, and we also hope to have had a discussion with the Māori Participation Working Party as well and look to a process for including Māori names that would meet the policy.
And in terms of process for people who are wishing to suggest names, or groups that might wish to suggest names, or committee members that might wish to suggest names, what is the process for getting those considered?
There is a site there's a marker on our website so that you can make those suggestions, and there's also through the call centre. So we've had a number of requests already from the public.
Would it be possible to add something to our next edition of FYI that invited feedback?
Yes.
Yes.
Certainly there's been suggestion I was going to ring David Cannon after the meeting, subject to everyone's approval, and suggest that the ODT may want to join us in getting people to put some names up as well and the reasons behind it.
Yeah, okay. So if we have suggested names, we can simply we don't have to raise them now,
no.
We can raise them.
Yeah. This is an ongoing process, so we'd like to keep coming back to the committee when we have new lists prepared.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm seeking to understand is number 22, which says the committee may wish to consider other names for inclusion on the register. Some of us
So are you going to the next policy, the next item? There are two items. No? Oh, sorry. Page,
Yep.
sorry, probably.
Page 7.
Yep.
I mean, we could add names now, but it's probably not the best practice because they won't be considered. So that line isn't seeking our names now. It's seeking, inviting feedback from the committee to come through. I suppose you, Tracy, is that right?
We're happy to formalise a process, and we'll make that known to both the public and back to the committee at the next report.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Mayor, Your Worship.
Well, picking up on that, I take it's iterative and there'll be more names added, and hopefully they will come from a wider variety of cultural and gender backgrounds than the ones that are here now. But what I would like to know is whether, is it first on, first used, or, you know, I think we want some assurance that as more names put on, they can be immediately used, rather than having to get through all the middle-class Anglo-Saxon ones for a start. It
would be a list that the developers would be provided with, and then they could choose from the list in its entirety, knowing that they'd all been pre-approved at that point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. You talked briefly about, I think it was Sandy, about the names, you know, whether would you go back to Ethel Benjamin again as a name. With going to to Dave Cannon, would you put something in place to say that the name can only be X long? Because, you know, for example, Ali Shanks Drive could work quite nicely versus, some of the others.
I thought you'd be saying Turner Drive.
No.
Subject to the committee considering the revised policy, we would provide some guidelines for Councillor Wilson to go back to Dave Cannon so that by way of some kind of media release or something that helped frame up what we'd be looking forward that would meet the policy.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Hawkins? I think possibly, is there a presumption that women's names seem to get the first name and the surname, and that some people think that for some reason Anderson's Bay Road, for example, was actually named after Mr Anderson when we know that it's after the wife who had the first Pākehā baby in Dunedin, isn't it?
I'm sorry, I'm new to the area. I might have to ask Sandy to answer that
But
question.
there is a presumption always that the men's names are why. Yeah. I was going to ignore that first time you said it, Councillor Lord. Sorry.
Well, I was just, it's information, but the three streets around the university that have got a double-barrelled name were all renamed at the same time in 1993 to recognise a centenary since suffrage. So it was done all together.
Yeah.
And there are some challenges with women having historically taken their husband's name when they get married, and so that also, when you're looking at who's being honoured in the naming, that is a challenge for us. And then the requirement that they are historical figures generally also makes it more challenging that in recent history it is hard to come up with women's names. But I'm sure that if we go to the community, there will be some that we haven't thought of that will fit the policy.
I am aware of a list of around 20 women that have already got street names named after them, so I'm happy to bring that back to the committee.
I'm suggesting it may be more, but we've always... Yeah,
I'm aware of
presuming,
20.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Noon, you offered to move. Second, sorry. Oh, sorry, Councillor Vanderbilt. Are you happy to add an extra note that the Chair seeks some other mechanisms for contributions of names? And I think it's really important there that we suggest the place names where they might be more appropriate than others. I mean, Archibald McIndoe could possibly be anywhere, but he could equally be around the university if the med school. I mean, some idea of place if it is appropriate. You're happy with that? Well, David Keenan, and I think FYI has been suggested, and another one. And it doesn't actually have to be people, does it?
No, it doesn't.
No. So
We've gone to the Botanic Garden to ask for a list of local plants, local trees, so that will be as part of the iterative process to come back with more.
So it could be places, events,
anything.
Yeah, and it's just names have been the easiest to start with. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any more questions or further discussion, debate? Yes, you wanted to.
I just wonder if we could see the wording. It would be helpful.
Yeah, it's fun. It has some challenges. Council.
And the reason.
Pardon?
Just coming. Councillor Vandervis? Councillor Vandervis, are you happy that's the second part of the motion? It's not the Chair requests staff, the Chair and staff. Also, yeah. Yeah, Chair and staff. Any debate? Do you want to speak? Sorry, do you want to speak to your motion first? No, you sort of have. That's the second half. The first part is in the papers. Okay, all in favour, please say, oh, aye, sorry. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Sorry, I thought he was about to. Item 6. The road naming policy review. Tracy, do you want to speak to this?
I'll just briefly introduce it. So the brief of this policy was to make it clearer for the applicants to come up with new road names. What we did with this one is the brief was exactly to make the policy clearer for the applicants. What we've done is define the criteria slightly further. There's 2 parts to it, and I do apologise, I've found a couple of typos recently and I haven't had time to correct them, but they will be sorted. The policy should be the why of the document, and the procedure, which is now attached and was previously known as the guideline documents, is the how of it. And so there is some difficulty in avoiding repetition in some places because of the operations sort of nature of the document. But we could further work on that, I think, and make actually the policy a much shorter statement if that was required.
Any questions? Councillor Venvis.
Just like to say that I'd like to move to adopt the proposed policy as attached with editorial changes as required.
Sorry, is it just the policy? What about the procedures?
Oh, sorry, yes, procedure and policy.
It's now, but the procedures are now incorporated into the policy. Is that not the case?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't.
Don't really need to.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm just looking at the actual recommended wording. I'm just checking. So you want them written as?
It is the policy, with the policy and procedure.
Yeah.
Okay. As under option 9, adopt the proposed policy and procedure as attached, with editorial changes as required.
You've got that? Okay, we're going to move a seconder. Councillor Pete. Okay. Do you want to speak to your... So are these questions or discussion? Okay, question. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tracy, just to clarify something on page 36 at F. So it's to do with naming of streets after persons living or recently deceased. And there it's different from the wording you use at 4.4 in the policy, which is kind of stronger. So I'm just wondering, should be avoided is not the same as saying banned or prohibited. So I just wonder if you just look at that again and just reconcile that.
Thank you.
And there's a spelling mistake on an Edinburgh name. Canongate has one N in the middle.
Thank you. That was pointed out to me.
I did pass that on. It's an interesting gap. Councillor McTavish, you had your hand up. Was that a question?
Yeah, it's a question. It's just in relation, it's similar. Section 4 of the policy, and I don't know what section it is of the procedure, but the bit that starts under selection of a road name on page 36 and 37, I guess it seems to me like there's a whole bunch of stuff in the procedure which effectively isn't covered in the policy. So the procedure is in effect more specific than the policy, which strikes me as a bit difficult in the sense that if there was ever any ambiguity, you'd go back to the policy rather than looking at the procedures. And I think I flagged this with the chair. I'm not sure if it was flagged with staff, but it would seem to me that that section of the procedure is in fact policy because it's setting the appropriateness of the road name. And I just wondered whether that had been considered by staff. Whether section 4 should in fact be replaced by that section in the procedure.
Happy to do so.
You're happy to do that?
I am.
Can I just check with the mover just that you understand that and that you'd be happy for that to be taken as a...
I wouldn't have a problem with it, except my reading of appropriateness, especially when you've got down to F where it says naming after person, basically naming after a community service or some other sphere of activity or local or national association. That's so damn wide. I don't really think that the procedure really narrows what we're looking at. I mean, I'm happy to have those appropriateness ideas in the policy rather than the procedure, but I don't think that they are actually as narrow as perhaps it's been read by Councillor McTavish. To me, they sit okay there, but I'm happy for them to sit in policy as well. As long as they are there, I'm happy.
Broadly, Councillor, when we did consider this, we're trying to make our policies brief generally with that degree of detail going in the procedures. Often the procedures don't come to a committee for consideration, but in this case we've combined them because of that. But I think that the structure, the way it is, probably fits what we're trying to do across our policy suite. If we could, I would like to potentially see how it worked as it is for a little while, just to see if it works and delivers what we need, which is clarity for the applicants and some confidence in the process.
Well, that's fine, and if staff think that it's going to work, that's great. I guess my concern is when you look specifically at 4.3, the replacement text seems to be much less specific and give much less specific guidance to any developer than the original text, which outlined quite specifically what could or what would be considered. So if you look on page 15, you can see the bit that's been inserted and 5.3, which has been removed. So 4.3 has been inserted, which gives a very vague reference to what applications must be accompanied by, but doesn't actually specifically say what road names need to reflect, which is what the bit in the procedures does, and what that 5.3, which has been removed, does. Which seems odd to me if we're seeking to provide more clarity.
Which is part of the reason why we attach the procedure to the policy. So the policy should speak to more about the why and the procedure more about the how and the exact. So the policy should be at a higher level and the procedure should be more detailed.
You're not satisfied with that question? I'm just wondering whether you think they should all be married together into one, so that it's either repeated. The ones that you like are the page 21, is it? That more detailed.
So page 15, if you
Yes.
look on page 15,
I appreciate that.
what used to exist was 5.3, which says new road names are to reflect at least one of the following in reference to the area in which they are located: a common theme, a historical person, a historical event, a significant local feature of social blah 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 blah, a traditional or appropriate Māori name, a personal name with a local connection. Now, to me, that was quite clear for the applicant, because they were looking at that and they thought, right, we need to do this. Yeah. In terms of the new text that's been inserted there, it's much more vague. It talks about applications must be accompanied by a reason for each name, including blah blah blah, but it doesn't say it must reflect it.
Names are to reflect the historical, geographical or cultural, is the next sentence. And then it's got, on the procedure, on page 21, more detail about that. Is that, am I...
Maybe if we change... if we changed in paragraph 4.3 in the final sentence, names must reflect either, that makes it, rather than are to, which is slightly vague. If
So you must. Okay, thank you. Councillor Calvert.
Speaking partly to we'd like more women and other minorities, perhaps to be, and partly to preferably they've been dead for a while, because those two go against each other in a sense, because it's more likely we'll find more prominent women's names to put there if they haven't been dead for 50 years. I'm just saying that that's... And so I wonder whether, when it says, and this speaks partly to Councillor Peate's comment too, whether when it says should be avoided, it might be better if it said sort of without a special reason. It gives you the feeling of without a special reason rather than, because you can avoid those things by just not doing them. When it says should be avoided, you may as well be saying don't. Or do you mean you cannot, or do you mean probably not? And it would be better, to my mind, having words in there that gave a feeling of with a good reason rather than should be avoided, which of course we can do by just not doing it. And together with that is, if we're going to say, as we've said in here, for example, the Clement family, I think, if we use a family or a whānau or a tribe or something, they're not all going to be dead. So what do we do about them? So, and you could encapsulate both those things by giving a, unless there's a good reason, or in special only in special circumstances, or would people either long gone or recently gone be? Is there any chance of putting something in that would stop it just saying should be avoided, because it's not a...
I'm happy to do that.
The question then is, I certainly don't think we should be doing that change quite as, we want to make sure it's consistently done, but are you happy, Councillor Vandervis, having put the motion, or moved the motion, sorry, that can be considered as a grammatical or typing correction? Editorial, yep. Yep, you're happy for that to be included, and I can suggest that if people were amenable to that being as part of the editorial, that we...
I'd be amenable if I was quite sure after all of that explanation what it is actually is going to be amended. Is it going to be a qualification or a disqualification or what?
And it's hard to write this on the fly until you consider where it will sit in both the policy and the procedure, so I'm loath to commit to what it was exactly. I've got a sense of what the councillor was asking, I think, but I'm just not sure how we give effect to it on the fly, that's all. So I would like some time for us to look at recrafting, and I do wonder that it's more than just editorial.
Well, I think it probably is, because
Yeah,
there's
I'm
a
concerned
substantial
that-
difference between
We could bring it
something
back.
that sort of sounds discouraging and something that says you shan't.
Can I suggest, and with huge optimism, that we will be coming back and discussing more names to be included at the next meeting, and it may be just a simple review at that point as well, because I would like to think that the anticipated is that we will have more names to add to the next list. I'm very hopeful that FYI and ODT and various other mechanisms will bring us more names.
Well, because can I ask my
Yes,
question?
you now ask
Because it's
your
in similar vein to Councillor Calvert's, really. I dislike the uncertainty of the way in which some of this is phrased, just as what does recently mean, for example. But in the same vein, the spelling of the road name without these macrons is discouraged but permitted. It's just, it's just asking for an argument. So why don't, I mean, if we're a road name that includes macrons is approved, why wouldn't we just say the spelling of the road name will include those macrons? I mean, or just not have it in there,
Because one would expect
So
that one would want to be
there's just kind of-
grammatically correct, especially after Ayrshire Drive. I think there has been suggestion, and I might need someone who hasn't spoken yet, which I think would possibly be Councillor Noon, to lay it on the table so that we can have these corrections done. Yeah, well, I don't want that motion quite yet, because procedurally I'd have to then deal with it immediately, and Councillor Vandervis is waiting.
Yeah, the Mayor has suggested that if I slightly alter the motion to read, rather than adopt the proposed policy and procedure as attached with editorial changes as required, that rather than use the word adopt as recommend to council, because it is a Part B, it's going to have to come back to council to be dealt with anyway. And I don't know if I'm ready for right of reply yet. Are there any other speakers?
Can we just check that we're going to get that done in time so we can do that? But that's a very sensible way of dealing with it. Thank you, Councillor Vandervis and
thanks to
the
the
Mayor.
Mayor.
Yes. Good thinking. Okay. We think we can do that. So if you're happy with that amendment, the second, I may have lapsed. Did we get a seconder? I thought we did. Councillor Peat, sorry, thank you. Yes. Councillor Peat, you're happy with that being amendment to a recommendation with those editorial changes, so that will come back on the 1st. Any more debate or on that amended motion? Because then I will give you the right of reply if you wish to do it.
Thank you. Just picking up on Councillor Thompson's point and also Councillor McTavish's, and I agree with Councillor Thompson that there is some vagueness regarding the macrons issue, and that there is some looseness in the way this policy is written. But I see those things actually as a positive, given that we're trying to be as inclusive as possible at this stage. We don't want to be too prescriptive. So the suggestion from Ms Graham that we actually go with this and see how it works, rather than getting prescriptive and getting into the detail of it at this stage, try and be as inclusive as possible, because we've got a bit of imagination in some of these names as well. We've got procedures whereby all kinds of different ways of bringing names into the system can be brought in, as highlighted by the Chair. I think that if we go with this as a recommendation to Council, because we're not actually making the decision here and now, any real wrinkles that appear between then and now can be dealt with when we make the final decision on Council, and even then we have a situation where we will get feedback from staff if things are too loose, and if we end up having difficulties with it not being prescriptive enough. I'd rather get prescriptive later than try and be prescriptive now. So I just hope you'll support it as it is.
Thank you. I'll now put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. That takes us, without an agenda item, I think, to notification for the Chair. This is the last time you have a chance to ask anything. There was one from Councillor Bizet who has emailed me about a street light, which I will again follow up on. That's one for Richard. Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. It's been raised again by the public concerns around safety around vehicles driving on Tomahawk Beach. And so I'm wondering if at the earliest possible opportunity we could get an idea of the various legal statuses of our beaches as roadways and what this council can do, if anything, to improve safety outcomes on those beaches.
The work is underway. Reminder of resolution, I think, happened at the beginning of this term, and hopefully we'll have some resolution before the end. And hopefully, will that come to? Will that come to the next ISCOM?
I don't know who that is.
Okay.
Will it be before the summer season?
That started.
This week.
Thank you. Councillor McTavish, I'm just going to ask for a procedural. Apparently, I need to move that we include notification of the Chair, because we've confirmed the agenda and it wasn't on the agenda, so I'll move that we add that in. Seconded, Councillor Hawkins, thank you. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you.
So I don't know whether this is you or another committee, but the Dark Sky Advisory Group, I just wonder whether we referred a matter to them from annual plan, and I'm not sure what the reporting mechanism is for the Dark Sky Advisory Group, but it would be good to hear back from them on that matter before the end of the triennium, so whether that's here or some other committee.
Thank you. Where is that going? No.
I'm not aware, but we'll follow up.
It, I think probably is here. Thank you. Any other matters? Thank you all for your attendance.